The Shadowed Slice, Part 1. An unnerving beginning. Working the graveyard shift at Antonio's Pizza had always been eerie, but I never imagined just how sinister it could get until that fateful night. The place was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, its neon sign flickering intermittently, casting unsettling shadows on the desolate street. I had taken the job out of desperation, unaware of the horrors that lurked within those grease-stained walls. The first time I stepped foot inside Antonio's, I was hit by a wave of unease. The air was thick with the scent of stale dough and something more sinister, like the faint odor of decay. The interior was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing ominously overhead. The decor was outdated, with faded posters of smiling families plastered on the walls, their faces warped into grotesque grins in the low light. My boss, Mr. Salvatore, was a gaunt figure with sunken eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. He spoke in a hushed tone, his voice barely rising above a whisper, as if he feared being overheard. He handed me my uniform, a stained apron and a faded cap, and instructed me on my duties for the night. As the hours dragged on, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The phone rarely rang, and when it did, the voice on the other end was always distorted, like it was coming from the depths of some unseen abyss. The orders were strange too, with customers requesting toppings that I had never heard of, names that sent a shiver down my spine. But it was when the clock struck midnight that things took a truly sinister turn. The lights began to flicker erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. I could hear strange noises echoing from the kitchen, the sound of utensils clattering and faint whispers that seemed to beckon me closer. With a sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I ventured into the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. What I saw there would haunt me for the rest of my days. Standing amidst the flickering lights was a figure cloaked in darkness, its form shifting and twisting like a wisp of smoke. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent light, fixing me in place with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through to my soul. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but I was paralyzed with fear. And as the figure drew closer, its twisted grin sending chills down my spine, I knew that I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The Shadowed Slice, Part 2. A terrifying encounter. As the figure in the kitchen drew closer, its presence seemed to suffocate the air around me. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but my body refused to obey. I was rooted to the spot, transfixed by the creature's malevolent gaze. "Who? What are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure's twisted grin widened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "We are the ones who dwell in the shadows," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "We are the ones who hunger." I felt a cold dread wash over me as the truth dawned. I was face to face with something beyond comprehension, something ancient and sinister that had lurked in the depths of Antonio's Pizza long before I had ever set foot inside. Before I could react, the figure lunged forward, its claws outstretched towards me. Instinct kicked in, and I stumbled backwards, narrowly avoiding its grasp. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst out onto the deserted street, the cool night air washing over me like a bomb. But even as I ran, I could feel the creature's malevolent presence lingering behind me, its whispered promises of death and despair echoing in my ears. I knew then that I could never return to Antonio's Pizza, that the horrors within its walls were beyond my comprehension. But try as I might to forget, the memory of that night would haunt me forever, a dark shadow that lurked in the corners of my mind, waiting to consume me whole. The Shadowed Slice, Part 3. Delving into darkness. For days after my harrowing encounter at Antonio's Pizza, I found myself plagued by nightmares. Each night, I would relive the terror of that fateful midnight shift, the flickering lights, the whispered voices, the malevolent figure that lurked in the shadows. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a hallucination, a trick of my overactive imagination brought on by the stress of working in such a grim and desolate place. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was something evil dwelling within those walls, something that defied rational explanation. Haunted by the memory of what I had seen, I became consumed by a desperate need to uncover the truth. I spent hours scouring the internet for any mention of Antonio's Pizza, but my searches yielded nothing but dead ends. It was as if the place had been erased from existence, wiped clean from the collective memory of the city. Determined to find answers, I returned to the pizza parlor under the cover of darkness. The neon sign flickered ominously as I approached, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out and ensnare me. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was heavy with the same stale scent of dough and decay that had greeted me on my first night. The interior was as dimly lit and eerily quiet as ever, but there was something different, a palpable sense of malevolence that hung in the air like a thick fog. As I made my way through the deserted restaurant, I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness, unseen and unrelenting. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, as if concealing some unspeakable horror just beyond my line of sight. And then, as I reached the kitchen, I saw it, the figure from my nightmares, its twisted form lurking in the shadows just as it had before. But this time, there was something different about it, something more real, more tangible. I knew then that I was not hallucinating, that the horrors of Antonio's Pizza were all too real. And as the figure turned its malevolent gaze upon me once more, I realized with a sinking heart that I had stumbled upon something far darker and more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The Shadowed Slice, Part 4, Unveiling the Abyss. With a trembling hand, I reached out to steady myself against the kitchen counter, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat of impending doom. The figure in the shadows seemed to grow larger, more menacing, as if feeding off the fear that radiated from every fiber of my being. "What do you want from me?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure's twisted grin widened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that glinted in the dim light. "We hunger," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "We hunger for the souls of the living, for the taste of fear and despair." I staggered backwards, my mind reeling with terror. The creature's words echoed in my ears, filling me with a sense of dread unlike anything I had ever known. I knew then that I was not dealing with something that could be reasoned with, something that could be fought or defeated. I was facing an ancient evil, a force beyond my comprehension, and it hungered for my very soul. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and fled, stumbling blindly through the dimly lit corridors of Antonio's Pizza. Every shadow seemed to reach out for me, every whisper seemed to taunt and torment me as I ran. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how far I fled, I could not escape the feeling that the creature was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to consume me whole. I knew then that I had to find a way to stop it, to put an end to the horrors that lurked within those walls before it was too late. But as I raced through the deserted streets, the cold grip of despair tightening around my heart, I feared that I was already too late, that the darkness had already taken root, and that there was no escaping its grasp. The Shadowed Slice, Part 5, Descent into Madness. As the days passed, the memory of my encounter with the malevolent creature at Antonio's Pizza consumed me. I found it impossible to focus on anything else, my mind plagued by visions of shadowy figures and whispered promises of doom. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth, scouring old newspapers and online forums for any mention of the pizza parlor's dark past. But no matter how hard I searched, the answers remained elusive, hidden behind a veil of silence and secrecy. Determined to confront the evil that lurked within those walls, I returned to Antonio's Pizza night after night, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature once more. But each time I entered the deserted restaurant, I found nothing but silence and shadows, the air heavy with the weight of unspeakable horrors. It was during one of these late-night visits that I stumbled upon a clue, a faded photograph tucked away in a dusty corner of the kitchen. It depicted a group of people, their faces twisted into expressions of abject terror, standing outside the pizza parlor on the night of its grand opening. As I studied the photograph, a chill ran down my spine. There, lurking in the shadows just beyond the reach of the camera's lens, was the unmistakable figure of the creature that had haunted my nightmares, its twisted form shrouded in darkness, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. I knew then that Antonio's Pizza was more than just a rundown restaurant, it was a gateway to hell, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred and twisted, and where unspeakable horrors lurked just beyond the edge of perception. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I vowed to put an end to the evil that had taken root within those walls, no matter the cost. But as I delved deeper into the mysteries of Antonio's Pizza, I realized with growing horror that the darkness was not confined to the restaurant alone. It had spread its tendrils throughout the city, infecting everything it touched with its malevolent influence. And as I stared into the abyss, I knew that if I wanted to stop it, I would have to confront the darkness within myself as well. The Shadowed Slice, Part 6. The Veil Unravels. Determined to unravel the mysteries of Antonio's Pizza and put an end to the malevolent force that lurked within its walls, I delved deeper into the dark underbelly of the city. Every lead I followed, every clue I uncovered, only served to deepen the sense of dread that gnawed at my insides. I traced the origins of the pizza parlor back to a forgotten chapter in the city's history, a time when corruption and greed ran rampant, and unspeakable atrocities were committed in the name of power and control. It was during this dark period that Antonio's Pizza had first opened its doors, its sinister presence lurking just beneath the surface, hidden from prying eyes. As I sifted through old newspaper articles and police reports, I uncovered a trail of death and despair that seemed to follow in the restaurant's wake. People had gone missing without a trace, their bodies never found. Others had succumbed to madness, driven to the brink by visions of unspeakable horrors that haunted their every waking moment. But it was when I stumbled upon the diary of a former employee that the true extent of the darkness was laid bare. The pages were filled with accounts of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, whispers in the darkness, shadowy figures lurking just out of sight, and a pervasive sense of dread that hung in the air like a shroud. As I read through the diary, a chill ran down my spine. It was as if the author had been describing my own experiences at Antonio's Pizza, detailing the same horrors that had plagued me since that fateful night. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I vowed to confront the evil that lurked within the pizza parlor once and for all. Gathering whatever weapons I could find, I returned to Antonio's Pizza under the cover of darkness, steeling myself for the battle that lay ahead. But as I stepped through the doors of the restaurant, I realized with a sinking heart that I was not alone. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist around me, converging into a sinister figure that loomed before me, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. I knew then that I had walked straight into the lion's den, and that the darkness was ready to consume me whole. The Shadowed Slice, Part 7. Confronting the Abyss. As the sinister figure loomed before me, its malevolent presence filling the air with a suffocating sense of dread, I braced myself for the battle that lay ahead. Gripping my makeshift weapons tightly, I steeled my resolve and prepared to confront the darkness head-on. "You will not terrorize this city any longer," I declared, my voice echoing with a determination born of desperation. "I will put an end to your reign of terror and free those you have enslaved." The figure's twisted grin widened, its eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "Foolish mortal," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You cannot hope to defeat us. We are eternal, and our power knows no bounds." With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at the creature, my makeshift weapons swinging through the air with all the force I could muster. But with each blow, it seemed to only grow stronger, its form shifting and twisting like smoke in the wind. I fought with all my strength, driven by a fierce determination to protect the city I called home from the darkness that threatened to consume it. But no matter how hard I fought, it was as if I was battling against an unstoppable force, a malevolent presence that defied all reason and logic. As the battle raged on, I felt my strength waning, my resolve crumbling beneath the weight of the darkness that surrounded me. But just when all hope seemed lost, a faint glimmer of light pierced through the shadows, illuminating the darkness with its radiant glow. With a final surge of energy, I pressed forward, driving the creature back with all my might. And as it let out a deafening shriek of agony, I knew that I had won, that I had banished the darkness from Antonio's Pizza and freed the city from its sinister grip. But even as I stood victorious, I knew that the battle was far from over. For the darkness that had once lurked within the pizza parlor had spread its tendrils throughout the city, infecting every corner with its malevolent influence. And as I looked out upon the city skyline, I knew that the fight against the darkness had only just begun. The Shadowed Slice had been vanquished, but its legacy would live on in the hearts and minds of those who had dared to confront the abyss and emerge victorious. The end, or is it?